to a very special episode on the Copa Club where we are reacting to Estevão's potential move to Stamford Bridge. Now, of course, I'm joined by Brazilian expert and Chelsea fan, Peter Pankovski, to talk through his profile and everything that is being reported around the young 17-year-old. Now, The Athletic have come out this morning and said that Chelsea have contacted Palmeiras and they're confident of completing the transfer when he turns 18 in April 2025, and that the Brazilian club are prepared to accept an initial fixed fee of around 30 million euros plus variable figure on performance-based add-ons. So very similar to Endrick's move in terms of his move to Real Madrid in the summer, with potential fees for extra goals, assists, I'm presuming appearances for Brazil later down the line. Peter, you must be very excited about this potential deal.
Oh, I am. Well, I am, but what I said is I am cautious, obviously, because of various reasons we'll get to. But yes, I am excited. I've noted numerous times that Estevão is one of those talents you don't actually want to miss on, regardless when and how you have the opportunity to sign him. So I'm waiting for it to become obviously official before I actually get to popping champagne bottles and laying out glasses on the floor. But it's one of those you can't avoid but be very like look at it with a little smirk and just say, okay, we're
And
cooking.
you accidentally mentioned Kendry Páez, and we'll get to him in
I
a minute,
did.
because Chelsea are definitely dipping their toes, and more than just their toes, into the South American waters at the moment, which is exciting to see. A lot from outside in will probably say, look, Chelsea are being a little bit more sporadic in terms of who they're signing and the amount of players they're bringing in. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But we should actually introduce Chelsea fans to Estevão and who he actually is. Now, obviously, he doesn't turn 18 until April next year, so he will be staying at Palmeiras until then. But Peter, what can we expect from this ridiculously exciting winger named after a certain Lionel Messi?
Yeah, well, obviously the elephant in the room being is his nickname Messinho has been given to him for like a good, I think, 3 or 4 years now, since youth level, like more senior level, that is. Well, he plays as a right winger, obviously, and he's left-footed, so he's these types of modern wingers that these days that like to cut inside and do a lot of their talking in those half spaces, which he's very dribble oriented, yes. He likes to take on players. Like I think that's his bread and butter, basically, what he does consistently. And the main reason why he's actually one of the biggest talents is because it's just the ball feels glued to his feet for 99% of the time. I guess that's why he's nicknamed to Messi, even though that's quite big shoes to fill. But yeah, on one thing I would like to mention on Estevão is because you said get the public to know Estevão. I think he's been a household name now recently because of Football Manager number one, obviously. Number two, because he's recently been getting minutes for Palmeiras, and as such, his highlight reel has kind of grown. But it has to be mentioned that, especially for the price you mentioned with Chelsea, is he actually wasn't that known only recently to the public, as big as compared to someone like Endrick was. Reason for that being is he didn't feature as much on the Capinha level that Endrick blew up on initially and took by storm. Hence why his stock rose so much. Also, he's just now being introduced. So, on one hand, people will say, well, he was rated higher in the academy compared to Endrick, because a lot of people that scouts and the analysts have also said that Endrick is less of a talent, if you could put it like that, compared to Estevão. A lot of people will turn to and say, okay, then why did Endrick jump for 60 mil, I think it was, to Real Madrid, whereas Estevão could be half of that, maybe even less. And the reason is really that compared to Endrick, he didn't have the just a humongous jump that Endrick did. However, that being said, we've only recently seen Abel Ferreira very smartly introduce him into the side, and the talent is just so obvious. I've seen so many people actually tuned in to just message me saying they're watching compilations of the player. And I know compilations are obviously every single touch, and you can always make it out that it's better than what it can be, but it's just so evident that there's a gem of a player there, and I'm honestly shocked that Chelsea have kind of. I understand why they've done it, but I'm shocked that Chelsea have pulled the trigger on potentially another deal to see another very big wonder kid from South America join the club. And yeah, well, I am excited. I'm kind of trying to hold my excitement together, but it's one to look forward to most certainly.
Almost appears rather that it's a deal which can't be missed out on, and it's mainly there's two ways of looking at it. It could be a bit of an afterthought to be like, right, what is the actual long-term plan for Estevao once we get him in the door? But it'd be a case of look on what we've potentially missed out on if he did go to Barcelona and Real Madrid. And we have to mention, like, look, nothing has been done yet. Chelsea's camp are very confident. They've had a scout out in Brazil, but Estevao himself, and he's been interviewed, and obviously he only turned 17 last month. He's a young kid, but he grew up watching Neymar, Suarez, and Messi, and he's been very keen to be part of the Barcelona setup and for the next 5-10 years and be their main star. And he could easily do that with such a high ceiling. But it's Chelsea who have been putting the people on the ground, getting the groundwork in place, and that could really benefit Chelsea. Have you heard more about this scout in Brazil, Peter? And can you let our audience know a little bit more?
Well, I don't know too much, obviously. I do. I have found him on LinkedIn, and this is probably going to be bad for him because now everybody's going to follow him there. But I forgot his surname, but his first name is Allison. He formerly worked for Corinthians. And now, granted, I said on Twitter that I don't know how much of a finger he's had in the reshaping of the academy and how they value academy talent, but they have Corinthians that being churned out some really good talents in recent years. Obviously, Robert Hernan, sorry, Gabriel Moscardo as well, Wesley now coming in. So over the course of the last 2-3 years, we have seen a different kind of perspective from Corinthians with regards to young talent, with the way of introduction. Yes, obviously financial issues have definitely helped that, but introducing these young players and giving them a platform to grow basically is something that is key for Brazilian teams in general, regardless of how they sit financially. So, and obviously, yes, he is a scout, but there's obviously some level of talent identification there that has to be mentioned that has changed in recent history. So that whether how and how much of that he has been a part of remains to be seen. However, with him being reportedly the person with the South American knowledge on site for Chelsea, it's admirable to see because I'm not trying to act like a person in the know, but he obviously has overseen a lot of these Brazilian links that Chelsea have been seeing. Guys like even if obviously you can turn to also other South American towns being Kendry and so on. This is something that has to be mentioned with a positive towards what Chelsea are trying to do. Whether it's kind of stacking too many players, we'll get to that discussion as mentioned. Yes, probably it is, but it's very admirable to see that Chelsea can identify this type of talent now compared to before, where history remembers a lot of Kennedys, Lucas Piazons, and Nathans that, yes, at some point during their careers they were talents, yes, but I could speak for a fact that a lot of questions were raised when a club of Chelsea's stature, especially back then and not now, where they're kind of battling for Europa League spots, jumped jumped everybody to buy a talent like like Kennedy. And all due respect to Kennedy, but he wasn't on the level of someone like Gabriel Jesus. And yes, I know there's a different position and so on and so on, but compared to Gabriel Jesus's talent and hype when he initially came out, it's night and day basically. So I'm actually impressed. I'm really impressed with the links I've been seeing. There's also other like lower level names mentioned, and lower level not in terms of potential, just in terms of knowledge by the mainstream media, like Van der Laan, Art, and Andre Santos as well, who had came through from Serie B and not the Serie A. Those are names that have to be mentioned in a positive light. Those are good young talents that, even if not a long-term Chelsea future, they could benefit from a European move in general.
I think it's more impressive because look, you and I have been talking about Estevao as well as Callum on the podcast for a long time now, and if us three can recognise it, I'm sure other major clubs around the world could, and it's a case of many not willing to take that risk. But what we've seen, if we go back to talking about Abel Ferreira, okay, he is very good at nurturing young players through. He was maybe a little bit too cautious with Endrick last season, but recognised his talents and brought him in, and Palmeiras pretty much won the league off the back of him. Now he started bringing in Estevão into the squad for the final games once the season was wrapped up, or getting towards those last couple of key games. And then this season, with a full sort of pre-season under his belt, obviously competing in the Copinha as well, where he scored 4 goals and 5 appearances, where Palmeiras underperformed in that tournament, really. But obviously, Estevão, again, with his highlight reels, he stood out. And in that tournament, so Copinha, anyone who is unaware, an under-20 prestigious tournament in Brazil, which is played before the start of the senior football. And it's really a mix of players who you will never hear of ever again, and then players all the way up to Estevão and Endrick, who will just take the mick out of them. And that's exactly what he did. He not only was he scoring goals, assisting, I think he had 2 or 3 assists in that mini tournament as well, but the way in which he showed his confidence levels to flick the ball over people, just try really naughty tricks. And it's when those players have the confidence there and they show that they're ready for the big stage. And he was 16 at this point, which is why I think Abel Ferreira learned lessons from Endrick last season and has integrated Estevão in now. Now, Estevão, we're what, a month, 6 weeks into the season, and he scored in the Libertadores, he scored in the Copa do Brazil, and then he scored his first Brasileiro goal of the weekend against Cuiabá. So, that's 3 goals already to his name, 2 headers, surprisingly, which shows another dynamic to his game. You said about how his feet, the ball sticks to his feet rather, but he showed timely runs to get onto the end of the box and score 2 crucial goals. 95th minute win against Botafogo SP in the Copa do Brazil, key goal, and the way in which he took his penalty. Go and check that out for his first goal in Serie A. He absolutely led that into the top corner after winning it, right? Moving off the right wing, gliding past 2 or 3 players, turning inside the box. The opposite team didn't know what to do and brought him down. And we're going to see that more and more as the season progresses. And I think if and when he is signed by Chelsea or Barcelona or whoever it is, the compilation reels are only going to get longer and longer when more and more people get excited about him. We're seeing it with Kendry Paez now. Obviously, Chelsea again have done, in my views, if they get Estevão and Kendry Paez, it's the 2 best signings across from South America in the next decade. And it sounds like a huge claim, but if you're getting them combined for 50 million before the bonus fees, I can't not take my hat off to Chelsea and the work they're doing to get these players over. I think everyone else will be hugely disappointed, and I know we're speaking about them in such high regard here, but just for the fees we're talking, and I think, as you mentioned right at the start of this chat, Peter, if teams like Barcelona and Real Madrid aren't willing to stump up 20, 25 million euros with these add-ons to begin with, I think they're going to be kicking themselves long term. So we've spoken about how well regarded Estevão is in Brazil and how everyone across the world are starting to see now why we've been raving about him for the last 18 months or however long this podcast has been going on. But there will be concerns if he moves to Chelsea as to exactly where he fits in. There's what is the plan from Chelsea? What is the direction outside in? I don't know. Peter, you're obviously a lot closer to me. And yes, we did mention that it's one, especially with Kendry Paez, ones which you definitely can't miss out on. But what is the long-term strategy for them? Is it a case of loaning them to Strasbourg and seeing how they progress in European football? Or with Estevão, is it a case of bringing him in and sort of moulding the team around him from day one? What's your thoughts on that?
It's well, you asked me basically to answer your question, and I actually don't know as well. So that's number one. But
Yeah.
I think on one hand, as I mentioned, you don't miss out on those types of talent, especially for the price quoted, because I thought it was almost going to be double in a sense, just because of potential levels and so
Yeah.
on. But yeah, when you take a step back, you say, okay, maybe stock wise is just not grown to the way that Andrew did. But on the other hand, Chelsea have so many of these hybrid 10 slash right wing as well. In Esteval's case, I thought he could work as a 10 slash right winger hybrid, as I mentioned, but he's honestly just purely a right winger. And his directness is actually Chelsea something do lack, unless Madueke is in, that's true. But it's just stacking up so many players on that right hand side of the field that you're questioning what the overall long term plan is. And that's my main worry in general, just with Estevao. It's not. I, I like seeing young talent develop. My footballing obvious bias is wanting to see young talent develop. That being said, I don't want him in England, but if he had joined Real Madrid and developed to the best of his capabilities, like Vinny, I was honestly going to be happy because he's a Brazilian talent that I've watched since, well, day one since I've had the chance to watch him. But as I mentioned, Chelsea do have a lot of players on the right hand side. They've got Angelo Gabriel, who is at Strasbourg now. They've got Noni Madueke. They've got Cole Palmer, who predominantly plays on the right. Yes, can play central, but again, then Kendry Páez comes in, who also has recently played in a more right central midfield slash 10 role for Del Valle, and that's good because obviously that means you can at least pair him with Esteval when they come in because they both come in together. But then you've got also young Omari Hutchinson, who's on loan at Ipswich, making serious claims to be a potential starter at Premier League level. You've also got, I'm missing someone as well. Noni Madueke, I mentioned. I'm
Which
definitely
goes to
missing
show,
someone.
right? Someone
It
who's so
just goes to
close
show
to
because
Chelsea. Yeah,
I've already
yeah.
mentioned 6 or 7 names, and this I completely understand the idea and logic behind it initially because to me all this multi-club model talk and everything, it was with the idea to buy some of these talents on the lower price, develop them at European level, and then basically self-sustain by selling them for at least higher the price. But what is the overall plan in terms of when you get an overwhelming stack of talent at your disposal and you can't fit them in? Because if if you've got Kendry, Cole Palmer, and Esteval, yes, different in a sense, but also similar in a sense, how do you all fit them together? If all three of them, and this is best case scenario, which is not always going to happen, all three of them start firing. They're all great, they're all amazing, and we've seen it to a degree with Cole Palmer. Then how do you fit all these three in the lineup? There's no way one of them is content sitting on the bench. Yes, the other two, being Kendry and Esteval, they're gonna be young, they're gonna be 18-year-olds, but they're not gonna be 18-year-old forever. If that happens and one is on the bench, then you stall the development of them. So I'm curious to see what the long-term vision is because even if you discard all four of the names that I mentioned or so, I believe you're still left with three names. My main worry is, and I've mentioned it before on the Copa Club as well, is Kendry not being destroyed by Chelsea because he's just that level of a talent. And now seeing Esteval being on the brink of joining Chelsea, I'm worried about the exact same thing. And now I'm worried for two players instead of one.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah,
no
no,
full
I
happiness here.
completely
And
agree with you there. And
I'm,
like you said,
I'm
but even if you, sorry, just to cut
no,
in
no,
for
go
a
on.
second there, if you said, if you got Kendry Páez, who was happy to operate on the right wing, for example, I think for me, he's better as a number 10, but keeping everybody happy, Palmer through the middle, and then even pushing Estevan to the left, like, I don't think even, I know you have to be diverse, but you have to then squeeze people in. It's a case of almost too many cooks and too many high profile names there. You think you nailed it on the head there. It's like you were worried for Kendry Páez, but to bring two in and nurture both of them at the same time, yes, you can say like putting two together with a stack of Brazilians like Andre Santos coming back, you're building a nice community we've seen at other Premier League clubs. But these are the next generational talents or the best across the world. And we're not just saying it for the sake of the podcast. They are. So how do you actually go about squeezing them all in? It's not like one's a centre back and one's a centre forward. They're treading on each other's toes. And even if you get those three across the line behind the striker to play, if they're all kind of similar or similar areas they're looking to exploit, how do you actually get that rhythm going? It's a little bit of a cause for concern. Again, this is me outside in, and it's just wanting to look at these two superstars and make sure that they make the right move going forward. And don't get me wrong, strip everything back. Esteval and Kendry Páez are two of the most exciting players on the planet at the moment. And the fact that Esteval's potentially being spoken about, even getting to the Copa America side, and he turned 17 last month, just goes to show how high his ceiling is as well. And Kendry Páez has come in and, dare I say, he's the main man at Ecuador. He's had such an influence alongside Moses Caicedo in the middle of the park for them. So what Chelsea do, it's going to be really interesting to watch from the sidelines for me. I just hope they get it right. But it's that fee, isn't it? Everything loops back to the start of the conversation, 30 million euros with add-ons. And people are saying Esteval has a high ceiling than Endrick. And I know it's different positions, but it's come from the same academy. And everyone's looking at Palmeiras a little bit closer now. We haven't even mentioned Luis Guilherme, but this is obviously The podcast will go on forever. We're going to start listing players in South America, and in particular with Palmeiras offering at the moment. But they're all getting first team football at the moment for Palmeiras. So wherever they move, they want to take the right step in terms of their career, their minutes on the pitch. And it's going to be a huge question mark over Chelsea. But we can't help but talk about how much he wants that Barcelona move as well. And we know like things can happen at the last minute. Endrick was in talks with Chelsea before his move to Real Madrid. So look, nothing is done and dusted yet. It's just a case of if it does happen, Chelsea need to have a plan in place to appease Peter and the rest of the Blues fans. But it's definitely one to watch going forward. So look, we will report anything else which is made concrete along the way, and we will follow his journey. But for now, you can watch Estevão and the Copa Libertadores, Brazil Serie A. He's not going anywhere until April 2025. So make sure you tune in, enjoy the action, playing midweek against Liverpool away. So definitely check that out. You'll notice within 30 seconds or even a minute of him receiving the ball for the first time, he came on and played the second half against Coaba. Obviously won the penalty, 2 successful dribbles from 7 out of 7 accurate passes, but also won 4 out of 5 ground duels, which surprised me as well. So someone who will fight for you, okay? This is not just all about sitting in that final third waiting for something to happen. He's got a bit of everything, and we've talked him up repeatedly on this podcast before, which is why we've jumped on to make a little short, snappy news segment on him. And it will just be interesting to follow. But look, Peter, thank you for coming on for this short episode, and hopefully we can have you on to talk about Estevão's next move, wherever that will be, Chelsea or not.
And let's be Chelsea. Let it be Chelsea, please. But thanks for having me. Honestly, it's a pleasure. It really is.
Cool.
Every
Thanks,
single
guys.
time.
And if you enjoyed this, guys, please do subscribe to the podcast across Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. We do more in-depth pieces on the Libertadores. We have Copa America special at the moment, but as the transfer window comes around, and we're only a couple of months away, and obviously we're talking about transfer links already, we will be doing more videos across YouTube, so do join in.